we are going to push to the right a little bit starting next week, and Francie will publish this after the committee meeting today. So for example, we're going to take the recommendations for DCF that were scheduled for Monday the 27th, and we're going to push those out a little bit. So there's some other schedule changes for next week. And then I will note that when we meet next Friday, one of the other changes is we have moved this meeting to 1:30 p.m. So if it does go long, we won't be leaving here at 6 o'clock in the evening next Friday. So there are some schedule changes. Francie has those, and she'll get those out after this meeting is over today. Okay, so and with that, do I have requests for any bill introductions? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move into the schedule today. We have, I think it's right at 12 people who are scheduled with in-person testimony for Department of Children and Families. We have 2 that are supposed to be on WebEx. We also should have, do you have any representatives on WebEx? Okay, I am expecting Representative Carpenter to be on WebEx and Representative Steens at some point. So, and possibly Representative Reese. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. Today's hearing is continuation on public testimony for the Kansas Department for Children and Families, and the first person that I have is Crystal Hedrick, the CEO from the Children's Alliance of Kansas. Is Crystal here? There she is. Crystal, welcome to committee.
Am I on? There we go. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Crystal Hedrick, CEO of the Children's Alliance of Kansas. Thanks for the opportunity to testify on DCF's budget this year. The Children's Alliance of Kansas is an association made up of 18 child welfare agencies here in Kansas, so it may be obvious that we're here today supporting DCF's budget, but we really wanted to specifically lift up just a couple of items. The first being social safety net programs, and the second being statewide behavioral health intervention teams. So for the past few years now, we've really been working together as a state with Secretary Howard's help to diligently reduce the number of kids in foster care, and doing that in a way that's safe and makes sense. While we've made a lot of progress, we still have some work to do to make sure that we are not exposing kids to foster care because of reasons strictly related to poverty. So these social safety net programs are really a key priority for us to ensure that as a state we're really prepared to offer families the hard goods and supports that they need without adding the additional trauma of foster care and family separation. The second thing we would like to lift up is you heard Secretary Howard yesterday talking about the McIntyre lawsuit and settlement. I really hate the idea of talking about a lawsuit in terms of creating change for us, because I think there's a lot of really good workforce and really good folks out there that are doing work just because that's what's right for kids and families. But nonetheless, one of the things that we're really struggling with in terms of that settlement is placement stability. So our kids that are moving night to night because of significant behavioral health needs. So the opportunity for the behavioral health intervention teams across the state is really an effective strategy for us to improve a lot of circumstances within the foster care system. Not only are we doing what's better for kids by helping them be stable in their placements, but we're also supporting foster families and kinship families that are offering care to them. In addition, by creating that stabilization in our foster parents and for our kids and their placement, we're supporting our workforce. So that's something that really checks a lot of boxes for us and can make a deep impact. So that initial investment for the behavioral health intervention teams would support that implementation, but then also in the future, it can primarily be sustained through Medicaid funding. So just wanted to lift up those two things, and I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Okay, Crystal, thank you for your testimony. Committee, any questions or comments for Crystal? Seeing none, I would say we do have 12 people scheduled to testify today. You just set the bar.
Ooh, sorry.
I'm kidding. I don't want to dissuade anybody from testimony, but that was short, sweet, and to the point. Thank you very much. Thank you for testimony. Okay, next up, we have Pat Jonas, the CEO of the Cerebral Palsy Research Foundation of Kansas. Pat, welcome to committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I will try to replicate that performance. I apologize for keeping you this late on a Friday to begin with. I'm here because I wanted to introduce a new program, and it's different because it was a program that parents came to me with persons that were young folks with disabilities, pretty high functioning disabled. We have 100 apartments in Wichita that were designed for folks with neurological and physical disabilities, and the parents kept asking me, can our kid come over and try living there and see how it goes? And because they're Section 8 HUD homes, HUD said, no, you have to be ready to go when you live in an apartment that we have. And so what we did is we started looking around the city. We looked at Wichita, that is. We started looking around the state. We even went to looking around the country. I sent some staff to Florida thinking they may have a program similar. We couldn't find one, so we decided that we would start one. And so we're in the process of rebuilding our apartments anyway, and I asked our board for permission to build 2 extra apartments, which they granted. And we started a program called GILA, the Guided Independent Living Assessment, which is a 6-week program that basically will allow, we look at different skill sets for living at home, like money management, safety, cooking, can you use public transportation, those types of basic things. Then we worked with Wichita State University and we developed an assessment tool so we have somewhat of a scorecard. We also partner with the Independent Living Center in Wichita because a lot of these trainings they are already doing and we didn't need to replicate it. Bottom line is we've had 37 clients that have come through the program. 30 completed the 6-week training. Some didn't, but that's not a bad thing. For those, we had one gentleman that came and he left the same day. To me, that's a positive outcome. It showed that that young man wasn't quite ready to make the leap, but that's what we're there for. We're looking to take a measuring stick to see how close they are, and a lot of parents are a little afraid to take that step. So in doing that, you'll see, I don't know if you guys have it, there's a copy of conclusive highlights. After 2.5 years, we've spent roughly $500,000 on this program internally. And the ask today would be to see if we might be able to get some assistance from the state as a pilot. And because we do work with independent living centers, and the jurisdiction of independent living centers is generally over vocational rehabilitation under DCF, that's what brings us here today. So that's kind of the project in a nutshell and why I'm here. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. So before I ask any questions, committee, any questions or thoughts? Representative Rivas?
Just to clarify, so is this number already in the budget inside of DCF rehab?
I would imagine it is not, but I cannot speak to that.
Yeah, I would imagine not. So can you elaborate just a minute on the money that you have spent? You said you spent $500,000 on this program so far?
The budget is around a little over $200,000 a year. We're requesting $215,000 a year for 3 years because we want to pilot this out. Now, part of that, about $50,000 of that money, it's not all operational. We pay WSU, Wichita State University, because they are doing a continuous assessment and they do interviews with clients and they do interviews with parents. And so we want to have that continuity of having a third party give us an idea if we're moving the right direction. Believe me, if this program was not working or flawed, we wouldn't be doing it and we would end it. I mean, so the idea came about because we were asked to do it by parents, and that's what we are continuing to hope to do in the future, and we'll kind of see where that goes.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any further thoughts or questions for Mr. Jonas? Representative King?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you have just one client for 6 weeks, or can you have multiple clients in that 6-week period?
We built two two-bedroom apartments, so we have the capacity for 4. So we're looking at serving up to 20, maybe 24 clients a year. So
Okay,
if
how
there
many
is
would be in the 6-week program?
all 4.
A 4 would,
Oh,
okay.
yeah, they're in at the same time. Yeah, and part of that, again, I'm taking time, sorry. When a young kid goes out to live, he usually has a roommate, college, wherever. They usually team up with someone, they go out and live. So, of course, you have some gender considerations and that type of thing. But yeah, we can have 4 clients for each six-week period, if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, committee, any other questions? Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, so you have 37 clients have participated, 30 completed a 6-week assessment.
Correct.
How long did you actually?
6 weeks. Yes. Well, that pod, that group of up to 4, they will be on our facility for 6 weeks, and parents need to know. And one of the reasons, this isn't to live at the Timbers, our organization, this is to live anywhere. We had a gal come in from Goodland, or the Goodland area, that came and participated for 6 weeks. The idea is to get a sense of how close they are to going out on their own. And if someone else was doing this, we would be happy to defer. We just can't find anyone. Okay, so that's where the WSU folks come in, because they will call parents and they will call clients, and they will be looking at another 6 months downstream to make a determination of where they sit, because you're not going to know when they leave, week 7, what happened to them. And so we do follow up 6 months and 12 months.
Because if it was just 6 weeks, that's almost like the acclimation that they're getting to that point. And then where do you follow through? What you're saying, you have someone else to follow through with that to see did it go well and continue that progress.
We do, and we want to have someone else asking the questions, because if there's performance issues from our end that we need to address, we need to hear that. And I don't know how upfront they would be if they're talking to us directly.
Okay, if there are no other questions for Mr. Jonas, thank you very much. We appreciate
Hope I
it.
didn't overstay my welcome.
You did just fine. Okay, next up is Dave Kemp. He's a parent from the Cerebral Palsy Research Foundation of Kansas. Dave, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate the time, and I'll try to be as quick. I'm not going to read from what I wrote. It's too long. It's too long for this meeting, but I am a resident of Derby, Kansas. I have a son who's 32 years old and participated in the GILA, the Guided Independent Living Assessment Program that CPRF offers. So I can maybe give a little bit of a experience of what it was like to participate in that program. But I want to give a little bit of a background on my son. My son's 32 years old. I am officially a scared parent, which was mentioned. I'm still a scared parent. He was diagnosed with high-functioning autism about 28 years ago. I remember the experience when he was diagnosed. He was about 3 years old. He had signs that we didn't know about. He didn't look you in the eyes. He would had trouble communicating. He would gesture and point to things, all the kind of things that point to autism that we didn't know about. And I remember the professional giving us, my wife and I, a piece of paper. And at the end of it, it basically said that Ethan was going to be prone to depression, have trouble having relationships, and he would be at much greater risk of suicide. And that really grips you at the time. We didn't take it lying down. My wife really became an expert with autism. I feel like I'm somewhat of an expert with autism since we lived with somebody who had autism. But the challenges at school were amazing. We had a lot of trouble with the education system, to be honest with you. We had to take him to daily therapy. He worked really hard, but he didn't make friends very easily. He still doesn't make friends very easily. But all in all, he lives at home with us still. He's 32 years old. We were lucky that the state of Kansas had a program that helped us find 2 part-time jobs that he works at, and we were asked to participate in the GILA program. And the one thing I would tell you about the GILA program is that I remember dropping my daughter off to college, and I was very afraid when I dropped her off at her dorm. Well, GILA offers a 6-week program where Ethan, that's my son, he lived at the Timbers organization. He lived in his apartment with a roommate. And I remember dropping him off and being very afraid because he had never been really away from home. He had never lived at home. We kind of expected him to have anxiety about it because that's what he does. He has anxiety about new situations. Anything change of regiment, change of routine, really gives him a lot of anxiety. So we got offered the opportunity to be with the GILA program because he's living at home. And to be honest with you, as a parent of a disabled child, there's going to be some time when he's not going to be living at home. He's going to be, we're too old, he can't live with us. So here's what I would tell you about the GILA program. He lived in an apartment with another guy that he didn't know. We really expected him that first night to call and ask to come home. He didn't. He tended to thrive in the program. His roommate, I wouldn't say that they were great friends, but they got along enough to live together for 6 weeks. We honestly were very proud of Ethan and how he came out of that program. And the program itself speaks to, it fills a gap. My son he was a square peg in a round hole. Always. I mean, when he was little, he was a square peg in a round hole. And GILA was able to tell us what we needed to have for him to live outside of our home and to live happily. And, I'm grateful for the GILA program. And one last thing, as far as closing, I wanted to say that Ethan wanted to be here. But Ethan doesn't like traveling long distances, and I know that this kind of environment would intimidate him, and he would probably be very concerned about just being here in front of you guys. I did ask him to come, and he politely declined, but he said he did want to come. So I just can't speak enough about the GILA program. I hope you guys help it out because it's a great program and it's helped our family. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Committee, any questions? Mr. Kemp? Representative Oropeza?
Thank you for being here and for traveling. Ethan continues to live
Yes.
outside of the home now?
No, he lives with me.
Oh, he lives with
with us still. So we're more prepared for what you know what, here's the thing I will tell you. I didn't think he could make it, okay? GILA proved that he can. I'm still afraid to let him go. And he's my best friend. So it's one of the things that I just, he's going to be leaving. It's going to be sooner than later, probably as I get older and my wife get older. But GILA, what it did is it gave us a detailed report of, hey, this is what Ethan can do, and this is what Ethan can't do, and this is what we should be thinking about working on, or this is the type of person, the type of case management that we need. So in a sense, there's not very many services for people that are over 21. They're just not. When you finish school, and for disabled children, it's usually 21, they fall off a cliff. They really do when it comes to services. And CPRF and GILA is one of those ones that steps in and works and helps people with that kind of transition. And there's just not anything out there that we saw like that. So I'm grateful.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Ballard?
Does GILA follow up with you now, even though he's back?
Not now, I would say. We were out about a year and a half, so it's been a while. Like Pat said, Wichita State did follow-up surveys with us, and we also, we have communication with the CPRF staff, but it's not on a formal basis. That is the number one thing that it did. And not to give me confidence, it gave Ethan confidence. Like, he can actually go out and, I mean, we were told, you know, these are the things that he has to do. And one of the things about the Gila program is that we knew he was going to be looked after. He had a mentor there that lived at the Timbers, that visited Ethan all the time and talked to Ethan and stuff like that. So they had mentorship, they had classes. They also did a lot of assessments so they could tell us, you know, Ethan's not good with, you know, with when it comes to, he's good with strangers, but he could be taken advantage of. And he could be taken advantage of in XYZ ways. And we had to be aware of that kind of stuff. You know, it just gave us so much information that, you know, to be honest with you, we're kind of still distilling it. But, you know, eventually, you know, it's probably more on me. I mean, he's probably going to be leaving home, but it's probably more on me being a scared parent still. But it's really, it's a great program.
I just want to say thank you very much. And actually, to tell you the truth, parents stay scared of a lot.
Yeah.
You know, we think we're confident until something else occurs, and then you sort of realize that I don't care how old they are still your baby.
For sure.
And still have responsibility, and you cannot.
Yep, that's for sure. And, you know, you want him to be happy and in a great place when we can't take care of him anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp. So next, we have Adrian Olnick, Vice President, Kansas Action for Children. Welcome, Adrian.
I am really impressed you got my last name right.
Practice from last year.
Oh, great. Okay, good. Well, good afternoon. I'm Adrian Olnick, as he said, Vice President of Kansas Action for Children. And so I want to share a little bit about why I'm here about the budget, because KAC is a little unique. We do not provide direct services. We don't accept any kind of state or government funding. So I stand before you as a budget advocate, really thinking about what Kansas kids need in this DCF budget today. And I'm fully aware of the constraints you have this year with any enhancement requests, especially those that might require state general fund dollars. And the DCF budget is one of the most important for Kansas kids. So I'm refraining from giving you a full list of all the things we care about in that budget. And instead, I'm going to focus on two main areas that correspond to my written testimony. So the first is summer EBT. You heard some great information yesterday from Secretary Howard about this transformative program to combat childhood hunger in the summer. Advocates and others have been waiting for a very long time for something like this to help with food insecurity over the summer. Unfortunately, food insecurity for kids is on the rise. We produce the Kids Count data report every year, and in the most recent data available in that report, food insecurity for children increased in every single one of the 105 counties from the year before. We know the pressures of inflation and grocery costs, and this amount of money is very meaningful. So I'm asking that you include the $925,000 that is needed for the state to administer this program to draw down the nearly $65 million that are going directly into the pockets of Kansas families to feed their kids every summer. This is going to not only go in their pockets, but it's going to help with grocery stores and other businesses across the state. You cannot ask for a better return on that investment as summer EBT. Secondly, I want to talk a little bit about the Children's Initiatives Fund, which is not a budget in the DCF budget, nor one that you have here in your committee. But the reason I raise the CIF is because it is one of the only funding streams we have for early childhood services. And increasingly, there are transfers out of the CIF and the KEY Fund, the Kansas Endowment for Youth. That is where the CIF money comes from. And DCF is one of the budgets where there are two significant transfers from the CIF into DCF, and those relate to child care. So I'm not asking that you eliminate those funding measures. One is for CCDF, or the Child Care Development Fund, in the tune of $5 million, and that's been there for a while. And then the new one, the $1.1 million for the Workforce Registry. These are very important financial aspects that need to be funded, but I ask that you consider to adopt the Children's Cabinet recommendation to at least put that Workforce Registry, $1.1 million, into state general fund dollars. We are at a funding crisis with the CIF because of lowering tobacco settlement dollars coming in, and so we've got to balance the books on that at some point. And I think this is a good opportunity for you to do that. Again, I know the $5 million is a bit of a loftier ask and may not happen this budget cycle, but it's something to consider for future budgets. So with that, I will stand for questions. I wanted to keep it short and sweet and really share our main priorities.
Okay, and before I turn it over to the committee for questions, just so I understand, Adrian, the summer EBT program, if you were to rack and stack these, that's at the top of the list? Okay.
I believe it is.
Okay, committee, any questions for Adrian? Got off the hook easy?
Okay, easy enough. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Adrian. Okay, the next one that I have via WebEx, if they're there, is Stacy Fuller, Vice President of Rehabilitation Services from Envision. Stacy, welcome to committee if you're there. She's not? So Stacy is not online? Okay. Well, if you see her pop up, let me know and we'll adjust. So with that, we'll put a pause on Stacy and go to Robert Cooper, Executive Director, might also be Kansas Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Okay. Robert, welcome to the committee.
Hello, good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Robert Cooper. I am the Executive Director for Kansas Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. We are housed under DCF for administrative purposes. We are a committee of 17 members. We have truly appreciated DCF's continued support with our budget request and passing that along to the division of the budget. And so that's kind of how we got here. But unfortunately, it was not included in the governor's budget and not for fiscal year 24. That was removed. So we are here to appeal and please ask you to put that back in. And I'm advocating for our Communication Access Fund. We are asking for $455,000, and this is for referrals. As you heard yesterday, the legislative research report from Amanda, it was located on page 10, item 12. And I'm wanting to clarify, this is not asking for a new service. This is not funding for a new service. It's just helping the state actually meet their obligations to ensure that effective communication to access to all communication for all deaf and hard of hearing members of the state of Kansas, whether that be for any court related services or any state agencies, programs that they would be able to participate in. So for these Kansans to enjoy daily life, most of them don't have access to that and they struggle to access any of these programs or services. This communication access is not an option, it's a mandate. And so it's not because just the ADA says so, it's because the state of Kansas has already set this precedence back in 1982 saying that communication access is valued. And so this happened even 1 year before the Rehab Act of '73. And so this was already established before the ADA was ever passed in the federal courts. So now, fast forward through time, through the 80s, we had decided to establish the Kansas Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And since that time, the commission has worked tirelessly to partner with other state organizations and businesses to make sure that there is availability for coordinated services and for access to the deaf and hard of hearing population. And ks.gov is the champion and has been the go-to for these services. Ironically enough, when the ADA was established and passed, the role of ks.gov weakened. And some realized that state agencies thought they were able to take care of it in and of themselves, that they knew what to do, they knew who to contact and how to budget that, but their priority became low on the list. agencies did not establish a budget for interpreter service or any communication access. And so vocational rehabilitation, VR, was the only one who had established sign language interpreters for any kind of a budget. And no other state agency did that. And so then communication access disappeared off of the radar. So now we have been fighting over these years to come back to this, and have state agencies are now realizing that KCDHH is the entity to turn to, that we can provide that access. So we have come a long way. The asking for this Communication Access Fund, the CAF, will ensure that communication access is continued for all deaf and hard of hearing Kansas across the state. I appreciate your time, and I will stand for any questions, and I will be available even next week. And just if you have any other questions about the Communication Access Fund. Thank you.
Committee, any questions? I have one. When I read the second paragraph of the document that was provided from Mr. Cooper, it says the Communication Access Fund, request was submitted to the Division of Budget, which was unfortunately excluded from the governor's budget recommendation for fiscal year 26. Was that an administrative error, or it was presented and just not accepted?
I think the problem that the governor probably reprioritized. I know it was a challenge to balance that budget. I don't know who was the person educating the governor on the necessity of this. So this, again, is the reason why I'm here.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Committee, any other questions? Representative Ballard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to read quickly. Have you received funding before?
No, for the Communication Access Fund, we have not. We have had a enhancement as a pilot. And we piloted this program, and we only focused on critical needs. Typically for courts in western part of the states, for those people who live out there that don't have access, we do have a plan to figure out, we know who lives where, we know the deaf individuals, we know what interpreters or have access or whatever that they would need, and we were able to provide that. But no, that's the only, we had some seed money, some pilot money, but that's all we've had.
You have a 17-member commission.
Yes.
How many people given are they serving, basically?
So of our 17-member board, we have 5 state ex officios of state agencies. We have Department of Health, Department of Education, we have Kansas School for the Deaf, we have the Department of Children and Family Services, we have vocational rehabilitation. The other 12 are appointed by the governor. 6 of them are hard of hearing. We have 6 professionals. We have ENTs, audiologists, speech language pathologists represented. We have interpreters. We have parent representatives. We have social work and counseling. That's who is representative on our board.
Thank you, and I'm impressed.
Thank you.
One more question, pardon me. Representative Rivas?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'm new to this one, so a little communication here for me would help. So
Sure.
You're currently being funded at some level for other services. Is this an additional fund you want to get funding for? And does anyone else feel this need now?
The $45,000 ask is on top of our current budget of $385,000. So this $455,000 is for state services, for courts, holistically. It is not for our agency, KCDHH. This is just for interpreting services. And I'm not sure how I can ask on a separate fund specifically for that. So I have to ask it within the means and confines of our budget.
Thank you.
Okay, committee, any other questions? Seeing none, Mr. Cooper, thank you.
And thank you.
All right, next up, we have Mr. Leonard Hall. He's Chairperson, Kansas Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Leonard, welcome to committee.
My name is Leonard Hall. I am the chairperson of the Kansas Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And I was the vice chair when we passed the interpreter law several years ago that include the Communication Access Fund. And since then, we had no allocation for funds provided by the state. That's why we're here to file an appeal. The American with Disability Act required all public entities, including state agency and court, to provide interpreters who are in need of such services. Kansas has a costly and ineffective system in place to provide interpreters for deaf and hard of hearing people. The commission had 400 registered and certified interpreters. These interpreters provide services for many state, county, local agency, court system, and other public entities across Kansas every work day. In Johnson County, I can say the system to provide interpreter on a timely basis tend to work fairly well. For the rest of Kansas, the system to provide interpreter on a timely basis seemed to work, for the rest of Kansas, including rural area and Topeka, the system provides interpreters is costly and tend not to work well. Public entities tend to have difficulty securing interpreters on a timely basis for many reasons. Not being able to find interpreters on a timely basis, not having the budget to pay for interpreters, not being aware to provide interpreter service as needed. As an attorney that appeared in court, when we don't have interpreters appeared, we have to postpone the hearing. State agency hearing, court hearing. Not only we involve the judge, the prosecutor, the other attorney, witnesses, we're wasting hours of people's time. And interesting, where the matter involving autism, a deaf parent with the deaf autism child in Garnett, Kansas, trying to get vocational rehab services. They're trying to provide for all the different people in the meeting. We can't provide an interpreter. They would have to postpone it another month. Those are among the many problems they have. That's number one. Number two, here you see we have two interpreters that come from the Kansas City area. And they've come here in Topeka at 3:30 to provide interpreting services. KEF, with the staff person, can coordinate other agency hearings during the daytime on Friday. Even the state, a lot of fun. They can provide for interpreter to come here at 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 1:30, 3:30. Right now, these four agencies will call and they'll come in. They only charge for transportation, they charge for the hour driving back and forth. So we are here to say the KEF system will provide a timely and more cost-effective system, provide interpreters for deaf and hard of hearing people in Kansas.
Thank you for testimony. Committee, any questions? Representative King?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Help educate me on what would be considered a timely response time for an interpreter to be able to come?
Well, we're here at 3:30 p.m. And we provide, if we know 1 or 2 weeks in advance.
Okay, so 1 or 2 weeks in advance is...
To provide interpreter most of the time. It's very difficult to provide, I believe, on 24-hour notice because they all got jobs, they all got many different appointments, their schedule is busy. It's not only trying to find qualified interpreters, because some interpreters will not work in the court system. Some interpreters will not interpret in the legislature because they're not qualified. We have to make sure they meet the level of certification, qualification to provide interpretive services. We got a whole range of interpreters, education interpreters, we got legal interpreters, we got medical interpreters. So that's why 1 or 2 weeks needed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
One more question, Representative Oropeza?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming. My question is, how many people in the state of Kansas does this affect?
I apologize, I don't understand the question.
Sorry, is that not?
I think I don't understand the question. Maybe Robert can.
Good afternoon. This is Robert Cooper. Based upon the hearing loss, we have 242,000 deaf individuals in the state of Kansas that provide access. So out of that, probably a third of those numbers, so about 75,000. Don't forget, though, that the interpreter services could also support other individuals with communication disabilities. So not just sign language. So I would say roughly 80 to 85,000 individuals could benefit from this timely coordination of services.
Thank you.
I've got Representative Ruiz on the line. Oh, WebEx, Representative Reese, pardon me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask the conferee if are you familiar with Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act and how the requirements for providing interpreter services as long as the state is receiving federal dollars?
And this is Robert Cooper. I can respond to that. Of that section that you're referring to, all healthcare providers is what it's targeting. So most state services are not included in that umbrella. So state hospitals would be. So if they are involved in a Medicaid payment, then yes, they would have to follow that section that you referenced. To date, we haven't seen any issues with hospitals or any medical providers. Those seem to provide access. Where we need some more focus is specialized communication. So like a specialized certification. So then they look to ks.gov to say, how can we provide that? And then we can help with that critical need. For in general, we don't that section typically does not apply, and I think we're doing pretty good.
Mr. Chair, I have a follow-up question.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a follow-up question is, are the MCOs, to your knowledge, providing interpreter services for folks who are receiving or under CanCare, Medicaid?
And this is Robert Cooper speaking. Unfortunately, not really. It's very, very limited.
That's what follows under the Section 1557.
Correct. It is still the provider's responsibility to provide that access. So where we see ks.gov has offered their assistance is the plan of care. So when decisions are made for placement for seniors within a nursing home, that's where we tend to step in and provide and use that pilot money to provide interpreters for that situation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
One more question, Representative Ballard.
Thank you. Well, how much are you asking? I had trouble trying to figure out what you were asking in dollars.
$455,000.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
And so we've got it kind of split in half. We've got some for agencies and we've got some for courts. So we're going to split that in half, and then so state agencies services and then court services, and then look for other communication needs for like deaf-blind individuals, like co-navigators, like coming to the Capitol. If there was a deaf-blind individual, they could not navigate this building by themselves. If they would go to the visitor center and then say, help me tour, the visitor center couldn't do that. So if a blind person was able to speak, they could speak to anyone. For a deaf-blind individual, that communication is much more limited. So a co-navigator would be able to give that communication access.
And should you receive additional funding, my question will be, do you have enough of the diverse interpreters that you need for the various places? Do we have enough people in Kansas trained for that at this time?
For deaf-blind individuals, it is a very, very, very small population. It is developing. I would say maybe 10 to 15 interpreters have that skill set. However, you know, if we're talking, and that is statewide, but that is still developing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Pending no other questions, Mr. Hall, thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on down the agenda. The next up is Lori Ross, founder and CEO of Foster Adopt Connect. Lori, welcome to committee.
Thank Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. I have two issues to talk to you about today, and there's written testimony on both of those issues, so I'm just going to make it super brief, try to mirror my friend Crystal there. One is that we are the founders and creators at Foster Adopt Connect. We are a child welfare organization. But we are a problem-solving child welfare organization. We do not do foster care case management. Instead, we provide supports that all of the child placing agencies, the foster care case management agencies can access for the kids and families they serve. So we don't compete, we support. And also don't receive the funding that those agencies receive from the state in general. We are, however, very closely affiliated with DCF and the DCF budget, and I'm here to tell you that as the founder of the BI program, we strongly believe that it is something that is desperately needed to help those kids with the high acuity of emotional and behavioral health needs that are most at risk for bouncing around night to night through the system and whose outcomes get progressively worse with every move they make. So I want to absolutely say that we are thrilled with the potential of the opportunity to be able to work with the foster care case management contractors on learning how to do the service of behavioral intervention and supporting their work as they work to stabilize those kids and families. So that's number one. Number two, I have in my written testimony kind of a list of some of the things that we do that are problem solving for the child welfare system. We work very effectively with children, families, and professionals who are involved in child welfare with the goal of trying to produce better outcomes for kids that get involved in the system and all of their various families. One of the things we do is we create a center, a connection center, where families come for support, where kids and families get connected to resources, and where those resources are then able in the community to funnel through us to be able to get to those kids and families. We currently have resource centers in 4 places in Kansas. These connection centers, we have one in Kansas City, Kansas. That's our primary headquarters location for the state. We have one in Pittsburgh. We have one in Wichita that just opened, and we have one in Lawrence. But what we are concerned about and what we're asking you for here, and it's not in any proposed budget, it's a pilot, not really a pilot. We're asking for ongoing funding year after year, but it is an opportunity to bring our services to far western Kansas via a resource center, a connection center in Hayes. So we're asking for $500,000 annually to open a foster care and adoption connection center in Hayes. Hayes is an area where there's Hayes and surrounding counties have a decently large population of children in care, about 200, and that is about 3.2% of the population, whereas the overall population of kids in care in Kansas is only about 1%. So we know there's a definite need there, and we believe from that location we can get services out to multiple rural counties surrounding Hayes in that area. We have experience providing services in rural areas through our work in Missouri, where we cover about 3/4 of the state, including basically 3/4 of the counties that are highly rural, and getting services out to those areas. I'm sure you're aware that the more rural the area, the less availability there is to access resources that are needed. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Committee, any questions? I have one. You mentioned the state of Missouri. Does the state of Missouri provide budgetary funds for any of your operations in their state?
It does, actually. And I would say that Kansas has historically spent about $1 million on the types of services that we provide. In the state of Missouri, that budget across the state is about $17 million. And so 15 to 17, depending on the year. So in Missouri serves about double the population of kids in care that Kansas does. So although this is not a great budget year, I would say we have a ways to go to be able to improve funding for and access to those services for Kansas kids and families.
Then a follow-up question. In the state of Missouri, which agency in their governmental budget structure does that funding come through?
Our dollars are in the Department of Social Services budget, in the Children's Division specifically, and we have a section of a few line items that pertain to the work we do. I'm happy to get you that information if you'd like to have it.
I'm curious, and then am I correct to understand that you received $500,000 for your center in Wichita? Was that last year?
We did, absolutely.
Right. And was that considered a pilot?
I hope not.
Okay. Okay. Representative Ballard is shaking your head. So, okay. All right. So those are the extent of my questions. Committee, any other questions? Okay. Lori, thank you for coming to committee. Appreciate the testimony. Thank you so much. All right. Next, we have, oh, before I forget, did Stacy Fuller ever show up on WebEx? Okay, okay. So we'll just keep trying there. Next, we have Karen Siebert, Advocacy and Public Advisor for Harvesters Community Food Network's Kansas Food Bank. Karen, welcome to committee.
Sorry, Kansas Action for Children also spoke about. As you indicated, I'm Karen Siebert, and I'm with Harvesters, the Community Food Network, and I'm also representing the Kansas Food Bank and Second Harvest Community Food Bank. We are the 3 food banks serving Kansas, and together we serve the hungry and food insecure in all 105 counties around the state. Last year, our networks of charitable food pantries distributed more than 46 million pounds of food to those in need in Kansas, from our smallest rural communities to our major metropolitan areas. Our more than 540 partner food pantries around the state see firsthand the impact of food insecurity in their communities, serving more than 200,000 food insecure Kansans every month. Food inflation has been particularly hard on low-income Kansans. The cost of food has risen 28% since 2019, well outpacing wage increases. And that's one of the reasons food insecurity among Kansas children rose an alarming 40% in the most recent Map the Meal Gap report from Feeding America. And as any food pantry director will tell you, we always see more families coming in the summer as parents who are already struggling to make ends meet face the summer months without school meals and the added cost of childcare. Summer EBT is a wonderful program that helps by providing families with $120 per eligible child to pay for groceries in the summer. And that helps our local grocers as well, bringing as much as $32 million into the state annually for grocery purchases. The state's investment in the 50-50 administrative match has a great return for Kansas kids and our local businesses. And then I also wanted to add our support for the additional $100,000 that was requested to replace EBT benefits that have been stolen due to skimming. Skimming EBT benefits is really an awful criminal enterprise, stealing benefits from the most vulnerable members of our community. And unfortunately, there are no consumer protections available. After October 1st, 2024, federal funds are no longer available for reimbursement, so no one, seniors, the disabled, or children, has any way to recover those benefits that have been stolen. Through no fault of their own. The $100,000 will help those Kansans who may be targeted while we continue to work with the USDA and our federal elected officials to implement the permanent solution of chip-enabled EBT cards.
Thank you, Karen. Committee, any questions? Might have got off the
All right, that was easy. Right. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to back up a little bit. I believe Stacy is online, so we're going to back up to Stacy Fuller, Vice President of Rehabilitation Services for Envision.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome to committee.
Great. Yes, thank you guys so much. We had some issues with the link, so appreciate your patience and this opportunity. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here. For those who aren't familiar, we did do written testimony, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but just want to recap a few things. Envision is the only National Industries for the Blind agency in the state of Kansas, and we're currently leading the way in low vision and blind skills training across the state. We travel and cover about 75% of the state to provide these services, direct care services that we do in people's homes. For those who want to age in place, we are supporting that need, and we are asking today for a total of $600,000 to help continue to provide those services. 15 years ago, essential services for individuals who are blind or visually impaired was removed from the state budget. and significantly reduced in how they can be accessed. These services included home-based support, independent living skills training, white cane instruction, Braille and communication skills, mental health resources, and assistive technology training. All of these things are crucial for individuals from birth all the way to end of life. And despite the need of the blind population continuing to grow about 20% every year, the funding has not kept up the pace to fill this gap. Envision has stepped in, and along the way, we have been providing these services all across the state. We served over 2,000 people last year, providing more than 6,000 appointments. And we are currently operating at a deficit of $1.4 million to sustain these services. So we were asking for the state to partner with us in this need. Insurance covers some of these services, but not all of them. Envision services help the individuals not only lead independent lives, but also empower their families to provide the support and encourage community engagement. To provide some perspective, though, for you guys and some real life testimony, I have brought along my colleague, Ms. Teresa Houston, to briefly share her story.
Good afternoon. I am the director of the Envision Child Development Center. I've been here going on my 15th year. I have not only just worked at Envision, I've also been a client of Envision myself. I went to college. I lost my peripheral vision at the age of 15 due to pneumonia and the flu, not knowing what eye disease I had at that time. After that, I wanted to continue my education, so I came to Envision, and they helped me pass microcomputers. So I'm aging myself here, but I passed and I grew. I went to Cali County Community College for my associates, Newman University for my bachelor's. And when I turned 40, while I was working here, I wanted to continue my education. And I was totally blind at the time. And once again, I got assistive technology services through our clinic here and continued my education through Friends University. I love what we do here. I have the opportunity to serve families ages 0 to 5 in an integrated setting. My babies are exposed to not only visually impaired students, we have students with autism, we have students that are typically sighted. And as they leave my department and grow, they go into our Level Up program. So we service them all the way through high school. And we also have our Workforce Innovation Center. Our goal is that they disperse throughout the country. I want everybody to know what we can do as visually impaired and blind people. We can do anything. And Envision has helped me do that as an individual. I continue to grow. I'm an advocate for the National Industries for the Blind. I currently serve on the Early Childhood Recommendation Panel for the governor. I also am on the board of Child Start currently and on the advisory council for the Child Adult Care Food Program. I am a busy woman, but my goal is that people know that we can do anything. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you.
All right.
Any questions?
Thank you for the testimony. Committee, any questions? Seeing none? Thank you. Okay, let's now kind of jump back into our schedule. Moving down, we have Haley Kotler, Campaign Director, Kansas Appleseed. Haley? Welcome to committee.
Chairman Bueller, Ranking Member Oropeza, and members of the House Committee on Social Services Budget, thank you so much for the opportunity to provide testimony today in support of the summer EBT program, as some of my colleagues have already shared. My name is Haley Kotler. I am a campaign director at Kansas Appleseed Center for Law and Justice. Kansas Appleseed is a statewide nonprofit organization dedicated to the belief that Kansans working together can build a state full of thriving, inclusive, and just communities. Kansas Appleseed has a long history of working to increase food security to all Kansans through food assistance programs. We especially support child nutrition programs that help the most vulnerable Kansans and ensure they have every opportunity to thrive now and in the future. Simply put, we work to ensure that no child has to go hungry in our state. As such, we support the recommendation to include the summer EBT program funding in the budget. Doing so will guarantee Kansas kids who need it the most will continue to have access to meals during the summer months when school meals are not available. Rates of hunger among children spike when school is not in session because children lose access to the critical school meals that they receive and depend on during the school year. Summer EBT provides an opportunity to ease that burden of food insecurity for these hardworking Kansas families who are just trying to give their children a roof over their heads and food in their bellies. You can find a bunch of research and data in my written testimony to support and show overwhelmingly why this program continues to be a solid investment in Kansas. But to sum up the critical need of summer EBT, I wanted to share a couple quotes, but I'm just going to do one for sake of time from some families that we've worked with who utilize this program. So, quote, as a foster parent, I know this funding is vital. This could be vital to the foster families trying to feed several kids breakfast and lunch, usually provided by the school, or biological families trying to keep their families together. Please consider our Kansas neighbors who do their very best to provide for their families, but just need a little more assistance to do so. And P.S., if you didn't know, kids eat a lot of food, especially during the summer, end quote. Thank you so much for your time, and I will stand for questions.
Holly, thank you for your testimony. Committee, any questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving down to Mike Burgess, member organizing committee of the Big Tent Coalition. There's Mike. Mike, welcome.
Yes, well, thank you. And so I'll give you my full intro too. So I'm actually the Director of Policy and Outreach at the Disability Rights Center. So I will be before you over the next few days, again, wearing other hats. But today I'm here representing the Big Tent Coalition. So I'm part of the organizing committee, and I previously served as convener. But so I guess I'm the lucky one who gets to be here to share this. So the great news is the experts. I love coming in afterwards because the experts already talked about what I'm going to talk about, which is supporting the KCDHH's enhancement request for the $455,000 and the 2 FTE. And since that kind of wasn't part of the earlier conversation, wanted to do that. And then just for clarification, in that item 12, they did break out the three parts. So 245,001 FTE is for that communications access fund for state agencies. 175,001 FTE is to provide that communications access to the courts, and then 35,000 SGF to help for the deafblind program, which supports approximately the 20 individuals in Kansas with that. Again, they're the experts, so if you have technical questions, I'm happy to phone a friend on that one. But we're here on behalf of the Big Tent Coalition. This is a very important program. It's vitally important to provide access to those important services. As was mentioned, it is required under the ADA, so it just makes sense to do it this way and reap those efficiencies, because it's kind of what was said too often. If there's two meetings, an interpreter will drive, or two interpreters will drive from Johnson County to Topeka, drive back, and it makes so much sense to coordinate that rather than have everyone do it independently. So I think there will be some savings on the back end of this as well. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Mike. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, Mike, thank you for testimony.
Well, thank you.
Okay, the last one that we have is Logan Stensing, Policy Coordinator, Thrive Kansas, Zero to Thrive, and he is WebEx. Logan, are you with us? We can.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chair and members of the committee. I'll try to keep it brief. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide testimony and public comment on DCF's budget. I'm with Thrive Allen County and Thrive Kansas. We're a nonprofit centered on how can we focus on our rural communities, make them healthy, happy, and thriving. And, I was hired mainly to address the childcare crisis a few years back. And, our local community, Allen County, was facing it. We were talking to all these other rural communities. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir when you talk about of having heard about the childcare crisis in Kansas, but also, with that work, we've traveled across the state and connected with people, providers, families, economic development directors, local childcare task forces, because we think a lot of times the best policy comes from the folks on the ground living it. And so that's why we're here today to support a few of the budget recommendations and to kind of elaborate on why we think they're critical for Kansas families and the child care system in Kansas. So the first budget item we would really want to support is the $755,000 for waiving co-payments for child care assistance up to 150% of the federal poverty level. Working families need quality childcare to go to work. This is one of the biggest things I hear about when going around the state, talking to families in grocery stores or at a community gathering. They talk about how expensive childcare is. And, one of the recommendations or broad goals set forth by the interim Child Care Homes and Centers Committee was to address child care affordability. So we believe that this state general fund request for the $755,000 would be a very strategic investment that really gets at that core affordability problem. We know that child care subsidy and assistance is especially impactful in our rural communities where wages are lower, but the cost of child care still remains very high. And so we would just really urge you to support that investment and really begin to work on how can we make childcare more affordable in Kansas and to support those families that need it. The second budget request and item that we support is the $1.1 million for the Child Care Workforce Registry, which we would love to, again, thank legislators for supporting that investment last year. I've talking about traveling across the state, connecting with locals. One of the other aspects of my job has been very fortunate to go nationally to conferences and to connect with other states and like, hey, y'all, what are you doing in early childhood? And one of the first steps they did to really begin to address their early childhood issues or the child care crisis was the build out of that child care workforce registry where we track employment, professional development, information is very critical to understand where gaps and where our strengths are so we can have a very informed approach as a state. So thank you again for that support of that state general funding for the Child Care Workforce Registry last year. And we would ask that you still continue the funding of this workforce registry from state general funds, because just like as one of the other conferees has mentioned earlier, the state is maybe suggesting taking funding from the Child's Initiative Fund or the Key Fund to fund this workforce registry. And as someone that has connected with so many of the people on the ground across Kansas that are funded by aspects of the Children's Initiative Fund, from Kansas Parents as Teachers folks to the Kansas Preschool Program, Kansas Early Childhood Developmental Services, so home visiting, all of these folks truly embody to me, and it's been one of the great honors of my life thus far to connect with to people that I believe cherish hard work and protecting and serving kids. And I think part of our duty is to protect that funding. And as was already mentioned, the Children's Initiative Fund is seeing a decline. It's at a crisis point because revenues from the tobacco settlement dollars are dwindling. So I would just urge you all to be champions of the Children's Initiative Fund, to protect that funding, to ensure that all these great programs that already exist serve and continue to serve Kansans, and to also in the future begin considering how do we raise more revenue for the Children's Initiative Fund to strengthen those programs and to continue serving our families and kiddos across the state. So that's all I have. So thank you so much for the opportunity to provide testimony today. And I hope you all have a great weekend, and I stand for any questions.
Okay, thanks, Logan. And committee, any questions for Logan? Representative Ballard?
Just a clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Logan. I just want to double check. You said for childcare, in order to make it more affordable, you're looking at $755,000. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, ma'am. Yep. So that would be to waive the co-payments for child care assistance, because currently co-payments are waived at up to 100% of the federal poverty level. So this would be just increasing that by 50%. So you're helping support some more of those higher income earners. But again, it's not, I would have to look at the federal poverty level standards, but it, fluctuates depending on the size of the family. But yes, 755,000 from the state general funds to have this strategic investment in childcare affordability.
All right, and you said 1.1 million, is that workforce registry?
Yes, that was funded last year from state general funds, and that is, the way in which states track the professional development records and the actual employment of who is in the field of childcare. Because that's a really critical need when thinking, hey, y'all, we gotta address this childcare crisis. Well, we gotta know who's providing the childcare. We want to know, what is the current level of their professional development? Is there ways that we can, I think one of the best programs that we've had to really improve professional development was the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act, which included early childhood education as one of the eligible career paths that folks could pursue. Because, especially for our rural communities, we have an aging workforce. I mean, a lot of the average age for a home provider in our rural is about 55. And, our centers and folks, a lot of these individuals, we are struggling to think through how do we continue to support folks choosing early childhood and choosing childcare as a career path. So this helps the state have a data-driven approach to do that. So yes, 1.1 million for the childcare workforce registry from the state general fund.
Thank you very much. Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Okay, committee, any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Logan, thank you for your testimony. That is the end of our in-person or online testimony today. I would refer the committee members to the written-only testimony that are on the agenda for today. Jeanette Owens, April Schuman, Desiree Strait, Charlie Hunt, Justin Horton, Sherry Fonts, Melissa Rooker, Tabitha Gibson, Matt Stevens. All of their associations are listed behind their names. So that information is provided for you for your own benefit. And with that, and before we adjourn for today, I just want to remind everybody as I open the meeting, the agenda for Monday will be the 27th of January, request for bill introductions, and then the only other thing is the budget hearing, Kansas Department of Health and Environment. We've scratched through the recommendations for Department of Children and Families. We're just kind of pushing that out. The agenda will be out after the meeting. So with that, let's have a great weekend. Thank you so much.